Atlanta International Airport. 9:12 a.m. Dr. Ava Montgomery came over, Gate 3 with a calm, purposeful poise that could only be developed by years of self-control and respect, without saying a word. She gave her business class boarding card and passport, anticipating nothing more than routine nod and scan. Rather, she received a lengthy, the gate agent, Susan, gave me a patronizing look, and her smirk deepened the instant she raised her gaze from the screen's name. "Are you certain?" With a tone of incredulity, she questioned, "This is your ticket?" Ava didn't just nodded and said, "Yes, it is." Flinch. The machine beeped a gentle chime, not an alarm as Susan scanned the passport. It wasn't a red alert. It was a normal indication, a common match in federal databases. Even though it wasn't a verified problem, Susan's eyes brightened as if she had discovered her gotcha moment. She leaned forward and let out a hiss that was just loud enough for the other passengers to hear. Issue, this passport is dubious. It may be a fake. People started to turn. A flight attendant halted in mid-step when a white man 2 seats over looked up from his phone. Ava, remaining calm, offered, "I can offer more identification. Feel free to contact a supervisor." However, Susan wasn't searching for confirmation. She sought a platform. "You folks always have a tale to tell, don't you?" "You? Before Ava or anybody else could say anything," she mumbled. Susan grabbed the passport to stop her, tore it down the middle, and held it out like evidence in a trial. There were gasps when the sound of the paper tearing reverberated louder than any announcement above. "You won't be flying today. Security," she yelled, flinging the shreds onto the counter like garbage. A uniformed cop started to approach after woman yelled, "Fraud at Gate 3. Nobody dared to speak. Therefore, the moment became quiet and motionless like the center of a storm. Ava didn't yell or dispute. Did not beg, but simply stood with her head held high and her eyes unwavering as the fragments of her identity flitted to the ground. She wasn't a federal employee or a PhD at that moment. Inspector. She was just a black woman being told she didn't belong in business class. This was a decision, not an error or a malfunction, and millions watchers are familiar with this scene since. It is ordinary, not uncommon. This is how racial bias manifests itself. In plain sight through the weaponization of doubt, unbridled power, and travel discrimination. However, what Susan was unaware of Ava's true identity and what she was capable of. Dr. Ava Montgomery sat in the little, windowless cubicle close to gate security, ready to go into motion. The fluorescent lights hummed as she held her hands comfortably lying in her lap. Above, giving the drab gray walls an antiseptic light. A security guard flipping through the notes across the table as if he was looking for an excuse not to believe her. Her name had been, he said that it was flagged in the system and might have been connected to a no-fly list. "It's just a coincidence," Ava said evenly. "It's a common name." Officer didn't seem persuaded, looking at her soft gray pants and basic slacks. Cardigan and the neat ponytail at the back of her neck. No expensive handbag or ostentatious aces, simply the calm, serene presence that some people misinterpret for danger when it appears in the wrong person's shoes. Nobody in that room was aware that Ava had previously recorded 3 different instances of racial profiling. By this airline during the previous month. She had taken flights under various aliases, sat in several groups, and saw how travelers who resembled her received different treatment than those who delays, suspicions, and inquiries. This was meant to be her last flight before filing an official compliance report with the FAA. She hadn't anticipated things to get out of hand like this. Susan, the gate agent, had gone too far, but not unintentionally, when she noticed a black woman in business class and decided to confront, ridicule, and shame her. Now, Ava was being treated like a criminal. Her professional identity was wiped in a single public moment, and her passport was in shreds. As the minutes passed, Ava observed as the personnel positioned themselves around her. None of them looked directly at her, and one whispered to another, looked at the glass, supposing her to be someone else, but Ava wasted to identify trends, monitor discrepancies, and carefully file them. The refusal to confirm her identification, the delay in getting in touch with a supervisor, the disparaging comments would appear in her report. However, this wasn't simply about a file any longer. This was private. Her phone buzzed softly, but she tapped her fingerprint momentarily on the lock screen while in aeroplane mode, but was permitted to do so during the examination. Notification was easy. Trigger sent, watch engaged. The FAA's Internal Affairs Branch returned to Washington, D.C. Got the signal. Ava had created the internal field protocol herself, while undercover. Agents should discreetly report instances of discrimination or hindrance. Seconds. The system uploaded time-stamped video footage, locked Susan's account, and flagged the gate. Security logs. Voice recorded in the final 30 seconds prior to the passport being destroyed. Meanwhile, in another section of Thea, woman disguised as a maintenance technician adjusted her earpiece while looking up from a control panel at the airport. She was FAA 2, another inspector who worked as an airport employee and was available to help. Ava sighed, remaining silent. My mission encountered escalation, still calm. The wheels were already turning, so she didn't have to shout. What the airline was unaware that they were now being closely examined for compliance. And anything they did after that would either the cop on the other side of her cleared his throat, either exposing the rot or covering it deeper. You'll have to wait while we check your name with the Department of Homeland Security, he said. Ava's eyebrows went up a little. You could have checked it with CBP's I'm registered, but that would have required a neutral process, not profiling. He hesitated. Secure traveler system, surprised that she was even aware of that method. But Ava didn't go into detail because she wasn't there to teach. He was failing the test she had brought him for. Meanwhile, outside Gate 3, a young man checked X and saw the video, which was already being published by Travel, while passengers muttered. Aviation watchdogs, civil rights lawyers, and influencers. The caption said, a black woman's passport was torn by a gatekeeper. Flag for agent over system. Her voice was never elevated. This is how discrimination in travel manifests itself. The comment section boiled over. I carry 2 IDs for just this reason. A single scan will get you being dehumanized. She didn't scream or fight, yet they treated her as though she had forced her way into. They usually claim that business class is about security. But when the passenger is white, security is never the issue. Ava didn't need to hear about the storm that was building online because she had already witnessed it in the holding room. Now it was about collecting everything, being composed and remaining true to character. This time, her phone buzzed. More FAA agents are en route. Sit tight. The cop got a ping on his own system and looked up in confusion. His face shifted and his terminal was locked. Miss Montgomery, he said. Can you confirm again who you work for? I asked. Uncertain. Ava folded her. I'm just a passenger, she added, her voice level. But I document, she said slowly. Patterns. He wasn't sure how to respond to it, but he wouldn't have to for long because something far it had just passed security and a check larger than a boarding pass was on its way. 11 minutes later, there was a knock. Nevertheless, wasn't loud or hurried, but nevertheless was final. The guard jumped a little and turned to face the entrance, opened slowly, revealing a tall woman with FAA credentials wearing a dark gray suit. Dangling covertly from her belt, out of sight yet prepared for any emergency. She was a male wearing a blue polo shirt and wearing a federal compliance ID badge. After giving a quick nod, Oversight shut the door behind them. Miss Montgomery, you can come with us now, the woman replied calmly but not coldly, and the officer blinked. Hold on, I was informed that DHS was verifying, she interjected in an uncompromising tone. We're handling it. You're dismissed from this case. Ava Rose gathered her remaining possessions, including her phone, laptop bag, and the ripped pieces of her passport. Put in a sealed evidence pouch, and silently followed the 2 agents. A passageway outside the room led to a side operations office, where a temporary secure command post had been established. Created. Several live feeds were shown on a monitor wall inside. Gate 3, the main terminal hub, personnel lounges, and security checks. Was a government response, and the situation worsened more quickly than we anticipated. It was no longer just about Ava. The man in the polo said, We've locked the air vista after your signal triggered a full compliance sweep. System activity at Gate 3, which includes intercom logs, Internal messages and other data began around 8:40 a.m. this morning. The woman in the suit went on to say, "We have already taken out Susan Blackwell's employee file. 3 informal grievances regarding discriminatory conduct. No one went above HR's therapy. The event this morning clearly went too far in public." Ava glanced at the television that displayed Susan's still. She was joking with a coworker at the gate, and despite her smug body language, she hadn't noticed anything had changed, believed she was in charge. "There's a pattern," Ava remarked softly. "It didn't start today," she said, piercing the room. "This gate has served as a microcosm of a larger problem. I've noted 27 distinct irregularities in treatment of passengers for the previous 4 weeks. Denials, forced downgrades, and delays. 17 of them were involved. Travelers of color." The room froze. 11 were women traveling alone. One of the tech cops keeping an eye on her went on. "Susan isn't the system, but she's been allowed to thrive within it." Data feed said, "We just got a hit." She messaged another gate this morning in her internal conversation log, "Watch me deal with this one." Timestamp. 6 another business class beauty attempting to fly her way into a lifestyle. Nobody spoke. And they didn't have to, just minutes before you got there. Outside, the airport continued to operate normally, with flights taking off, announcements echoing, and unaware that a federal probe had just begun. Travelers carried their baggage past one another, beneath their feet, but Ava was aware of it because she had planned this type of action herself until it was time to come out. Caution was always crucial. Under the pretense of survey research, a substitute would arrive tomorrow to complete the passenger interviews. Susan, and by the middle of the afternoon, her team will be put on temporary leave, and Air Vista Corporate had already received a warning and a request for prompt assistance from FAA Legal. This event had gone public, drawing the attention of Congress. As the operation team, Ava stepped away after finishing the debriefing to call her daughter, who answered on the second ring. "Hey, baby," Ava said. "I'm okay. Are you sure?" She whispered quietly. "I saw the clip online," her daughter enquired. "All over. I understand, but that's excellent. Show it to them. It's not about me." Pause. "I observed your posture. There, I needed them to fully disclose themselves from the hallway, and you didn't move." "I couldn't," Ava answered. "Mia is requesting comment," the agent in the suit said, with a gentle gesture. "If you would like, we may conceal your identity." Ava trembled. "No press," she responded. "Not just yet. Retaliation is not the point here. It's about a record." She hung up the phone and made her way back towards the command room. Her presence clear and her stride steady. She had mingled for weeks, watching, gathering, and being undervalued. However, the shield was off, the investigation was underway. And Ava Montgomery didn't just needed the truth to resound louder than the lies that attempted to quiet her. Thus she needed to speak up. 2 uniformed without any fanfare or polite request, an officer came up to Ava and said, "You'll need to accompany us." Without protesting or questioning, she simply turned and strolled quietly next to them while thousands of eyes followed her down the hallway, some sneering, some intrigued, others satisfied. She once looked up at the ceiling dome, where a tiny red light blinked. That one glance was sufficient, and it would eventually serve as a timestamp in the FAA's internal. Susan, on the other hand, spoke to a supervisor while standing erect at the gate desk, like a hunter returning after a kill. He held up fragments of the ripped passport with animated gestures. The woman said that her ID was not authentic and was likely fabricated. Enter business class under a fictitious name. "I reported her right away." The supervisor arched an eyebrow at her pleased tone, as if she had performed a public duty. "Did?" Susan sneered. "You check with a second scan?" She wasn't even supposed to be there. Without a lawyer or phone. Ava was instructed to sit in a windowless room next to Terminal B. 2 hours after the call, the air conditioner began to rattle overhead, and a man came in, sat across from her, flicking a folder languidly, his badge partly tucked inside a dark green DHS vest. Without introducing himself, he said plainly, "What are you doing?" In his chest pocket, "Your name produced." A pause. He tapped the folder. Ava remained silent. Flag. Do you experience it frequently? There was still no response. He leaned back with his arms crossed. Are you fleeing something, a refugee, or perhaps flying on someone else's dime? Ava glanced up at him. You're asking the wrong questions. He blinked, slowly, sharply. Not angrily. A adolescent girl wearing a denim jacket back at gate 3 caught me off guard with her tone. She touched her mother while browsing through her phone, looking up once as the screen loaded, then widening her eyes. Mom, that woman, the one they took away, he muttered next to her. She's turning her phone so her mother could view the 14-second video that was becoming viral. Had recently appeared on X, depicting Susan severing the passport in two. Ava stood still until the security call came in, with the caption, Gate, agent destroys a black woman's passport out of mistrust. The female does not object. This is America. In a matter of minutes, the video received 50,000 views. It surpassed 600,000 in an hour. The tape was seen by an FAA technician posing as an airline maintenance contractor at Concourse C. She kept an eye on a private watchdog forum. She signed in right away to a protected console that looked like a check-in kiosk. And sent out a red-level warning. Only a few people knew the alarm code of agents, a compromised field agent. Visibility trigger protocol. Although she was unaware of the woman's identity, the stillness of her posture revealed all she required. A secure procedure was initiated by the time the signal arrived at FAA servers located in Washington. Automatically, multiple perspectives of Gate 3 surveillance footage were brought in. Uploaded into encrypted archives in real time. Susan and the officers that escorted Ava had their faces recognized over the past 30 days. Susan's name was included in 3 internal passenger complaints that were identified by keyword tracking. Not one escalated. One read, the gate agent frequently remarked that the travelers didn't appear like the first. Another said, I was informed that my old passport appeared to have been from a street seller. As the case progressed, Ava was back in the holding chamber. Made a business offer. An older man came in, wearing a civilian blazer instead of a consistent. Softer than the rest, he started, Look, nobody wishes to destroy your life over this. We can avoid charges if you simply acknowledge that the passport is a forgery. Fix the silence. You turned to leave. Ava brought up an eyebrow. Is that dangerous? He gave a shrug. It's a choice. We can proceed with a complete background investigation if that is your preference. Ava crossed her arms. You don't know whose file you're constructing, do you? The man simply shifted without responding. Departed in discomfort. At exactly 3:33 p.m., a black SUV with federal plates arrived at the staff-only entrance close to terminal operations, and 3 people emerged wearing one displayed identification. The others had a thin briefcase, and they all wore matching gray suits, a safe tablet. They went swiftly and deliberately, and nobody attempted to stop them when they entered the premises. During a staff meeting over flight delays, the general manager of the airport was given a silent notification. The words, FAA inspection team, made him freeze. Access granted immediately at authorization level 4. Is this a drill? He inquired. When the squad arrived at Gate 3, no one responded, and Susan was questioned. To move aside. Her face was red, perplexed, and then white when she realized that federal seal. One of the agents raised a hand as she attempted to speak. We are not here to give answers. The lead agent in the nearby briefing room cleared her throat and read from a document. Delta District, Federal Aviation Administration Compliance Inspection Number 117. Topics: misuse of power, unapproved destruction of government identity, and systematic racial prejudice. The room went mute. Susan parted her lips, then shut them again, and Ava, hidden behind the one-way mirror in the adjacent room, remained silent and waited as everything happened. Ava stayed calm in the private viewing room next to the operations office. The one-way glass in front of everything was exposed by her. The regional director's shaking hands as he read the inspection letter. The stiff Susan's posture and the HR representative's attempt to look helpful collapsing with every second that goes by inch by inch. For the first time since, Ava gave herself a little breath that morning. But it was not one of contentment or relief, just accuracy, because of what was happening beyond the glass. Was systemic exposure, not personal retaliation. The FAA inspection took place in the neighboring room. Nobody at Air Vista had anticipated the layers that the team was revealing. An agent displayed a list of travelers who had been marked for manual identity verification for the previous 45 days. Had names that were historically Hispanic or Black. Another agent tracked down internal messes, including private Slack exchanges between Susan and 2 additional gate agents. One message said, "You would think that by now they would know better." "This one today," said another. "If you can't dress the part, you can't fly the part." Arrived behaving as though she controlled the airport. No longer. Screenshots were produced, with red tabs added to indicate carefully arranged in evidence folders. Every detail was read out into the record in a composed manner, without any yelling, no sound of a system being broken open, without any drama. The regional manager attempted to take back control. "We were unaware that any of this was taking place," he stated in a voice, "We do not support prejudice." The lead inspector interrupted him. "If we knew." "You did," almost concealing the quiver. Susan finally said, "You had the data, you had complaints, you just didn't read it." More to herself than to anybody else, she mumbled. She didn't even look like she belonged in business class. However, after hearing it, the room recorded it. Conversely, the viral video had surpassed 1.2 on the opposite side of the airport. Million views. Lawyers for civil rights were quoting it. It was being looped by news hosts. Passengers in different terminals were displaying it in real time to one another. Sources confirm a woman in a passport. A CNN correspondent tweeted, "FAA presence at Atlanta's Gate 3 has been confirmed, and the event may involve a federal investigator." The story is still being developed. Ava stood motionless in the viewing room, watching the unraveling. Although the pressure was effective, the harm needed to be comprehensive, for precedent rather than punishment. The man returned to the interrogation wing. An FAA legal advisor was addressing the person in the DHS vest who had spent hours questioning. "Ava, did you demand a confession from the traveler by threatening legal action?" The man paused. He said, "She wasn't cooperative." "Did you verify her identification using the secure passenger system of CBP?" The man averted his gaze. The system was unable to load. The attorney displayed a tablet. Displaying a time log. "It loaded. Simply put, you didn't use it." Susan was led away from 3:58 p.m. in the room. Even though she wasn't in handcuffs, she could as well have a bane. A group of people had gathered close to the glass hallway, silent and without phones, yet observing. "Is that her?" several murmured, while others took notes as she went by, head pallid, face down. A digital copy of the inspection order was uploaded within the control room, the internal case archive of the FAA. It stated in the subject line, "Operational gated degree of discrimination, leave case study 117DL. Training would be conducted using." The report. Future agents on how to identify systemic profiling on all commercial airlines in the world, not just Air Vista. As the agents' meeting came to an end, Ava left the viewing room and entered federal airspace. Ash was given the sealed evidence pouch with her destroyed passport by the young officer. He said, "Ma'am, not sure what's some effing extra to say." She accepted it calmly, gave him a single nod, and moved on. She didn't talk. She didn't have to. What began at a gate as a silent insult counter was the focus of a nationwide audit. Ava understood, however, that this was not the end. It was only the location where it was no longer possible to mistake silence for weakness. And at last, the time had arrived for her to come forward. However, not just yet, as the truth must first emerge. It required the system to remain motionless long enough to hear it via the front door. There was silence in the briefing room, but it wasn't finished. Not quite yet. The FAA staff was completing paperwork and preparing when the lead agent turned and posed a question that altered the temperature in the final logs for headquarters space. "Is she prepared to speak to the group?" Ava had been silent for hours. Watching, letting the system reveal itself and speak for itself. However, currently with purposeful composure, she entered the room with just a slim black folder, and the sealed her torn passport was in the evidence pouch. No big reveal, no badge, only the seriousness of being there. The director of the region blinked. "Hold on," Uriva gave one nod. According to Top Inspector Dr. Ava Montgomery, Operation Gatewatch is led by the Federal Aviation Administration's Office of Civil Compliance. The room fell silent like a marble with a dropped pin. Now sitting in the far corner, Susan glanced up. "Asif, it's your first time seeing Ava." She opened her mouth. There were no words. Ava took a step open the black folder and went to the head of the room. There were pages and reports inside, accompanied by tabs, data tables, screenshots, and transcripts. She stated unequivocally that she had been conducting a clandestine compliance operation within Air Vista Southeast Division, with an emphasis on travel discrimination, gate-level racial profiling, and misuse of discretionary power within the organization. Although she maintained composure and control, her voice had a surgical accuracy. "I flew 10 routes during that period using my legal name, never hiding who I was, but yet never offering to do it. I produced official boarding passes, authentic travel documentation, and impartial attitude. I had delays on 6 of those 10 flights, re-verifications, or unjustified downgrading attempts. 4 times, I was told by agents, your agents, that I had either bought the wrong ticket or fabricated paperwork." She made up Haga. "I am a federal official, a U.S. citizen, and a regular traveler in excellent standing. Every compliance metric was met by my travel behavior. However, I was given repeatedly as a suspect rather than a traveler." Gently, she set the evidence pouch down on the table. This was fictional result. A passport issued by the government that was torn in front of witnesses by unworker with a pattern that has been documented. You also referred to it as a misunderstanding. The regional manager seems to be interested in to melt through the floor. Anxiously, the HR officer picked at a pen cap. Your internal policy permits gate agents to escalate any identity concern directly. 2. Ava went on. Supervisors. In my situation, the procedure was purposefully omitted. The choice is proof of malevolent intent now. She turned to the FAA crew. Start the final documentation of the interview. In accordance with Title 49 CF FHR 449, I am requesting full-scale federal enforcement. Non-adherence to the non-discrimination policy of civil aviation. We are currently suspending this gate. Among the FAA agents got up and began giving orders. Verbally, all Gate 3 operations at Hartsfield-Jackson will be discontinued immediately, are suspended under Air Vista while a federal review is conducted. All credentials for digital access have been disabled. All employees are required to stay available for interrogation, and communication servers are confiscated. An Air Vista in uniform, the operations chief, froze after entering the room in the middle of the statement. Whose authority is it? In an attempt to regain ground, he asked. Ava pivoted. Mine. She extended her hand into her folder and displayed her official letter of designation. Signed, embossed, and stamped by government authorities. It was a silent, nuclear moment. At last Susan said something. I had no idea, she whispered. You didn't appear to have been cut off by Ava, such as if someone who had strength? As if they knew the system better than you ever will. That was the idea. I didn't have to examine the section. You had to show me yours. She approached without seeming hostile yet assurance. You believed you were safeguarding something. Your power, your story, your dominance. However, all of your prejudice was preserved. And this corporation will now have to pay millions of dollars for it. Susan took a deep breath. Her palms were still shaking. Ava spoke again to the room. A formal notice of violation will be filed by me with the FAA's headquarters. A comprehensive report to Congress will be submitted. The review of your license will be put on hold until the civil investigations are finished. The film is authentic and it will be utilized. With her folder in hand, she turned to go. Hand. Ava hesitated as the regional director finally yelled, Dr. Montgomery, please, if we can do this quietly. Was still in the room, she continued, you made it public. I'm just making it accurate. She left the room. Within 2 hours of Ava's departure. There was a stillness that went beyond embarrassment because this was more than simply a reckoning. It was a record. Federal activity swept over the airport like an invisible current after the operations briefing. Gate 3 was formally marked off with discreetly placed yellow federal compliance and effect signs close to the check-in screens. Employees were transferred or sent home, and passengers were diverted. Previously smugly efficient personnel now muttered as they moved through the hallways looking for spies in civilian clothes with government badges. Everyone was aware that something had gone horribly wrong. The interim statement was written by the FAA Civil Rights Division in Washington. The FAA has initiated a comprehensive inquiry of allegations of discriminatory behavior in the gate operations of Air Vista Airlines. Dedicated to safeguarding the civil liberties and dignity of every traveler. Ava read the text and provided a single note. Include cooperation with congressional review and federal oversight agencies, and assure them that it won't disappear in the news cycle. In the meanwhile, Susan Blackwell was sent a formal notice of suspension by secure email. Her name was added to the government surveillance list for civil cases, and company-issued gadgets were remotely locked. Aircraft workers. She would not be returning to a public-facing position anytime soon, but for Ava, the goal was never repercussions. Late that night, she sat in a quiet conference room in the FAA's Atlanta headquarters, field office. Final witness testimonies collected by embedded agents were brought in by 2 interns. Passengers' notes from those who had been profiled at gate level but had not reported it. One man wrote, "I believed I was insane. I was consistently flagged and requested to move aside. I believed that I might have appeared anxious. I just looked black, it turns out." Ava underlined that line, but she didn't grinning. She put it to the appendix of her report, underlining it with a pen. "We've confirmed the woman in the viral airport video is FAA," tweeted a well-known human rights attorney that same evening. Dr. Ava Montgomery, inspector. "It's more than poetic justice here. Federal responsibility is at issue. Make the skies safer. For everybody." The tweet was shared more than 90,000 times. At 11:12 p.m., Ava got a direct message. This was a measured, inquisitive call from a senior congressional staffer. "We've been briefed. Dr. Montgomery, the House Transportation Oversight Subcommittee, would want you to give your conclusions on the floor the following month. You have constructed the most compelling live case for structural profiling that we have seen in a decade." Without ego or self-congratulation, she offered a professional thank you. This had nothing to do with her. Over the next few days, Ava's name would not be mentioned in public declarations. She turned down every interview. Her face was seldom seen during press conferences. What was important was not woman, but the aftermath of her actions. A reckoning based on documentation rather than indignation. By the conclusion of the week, citing significant known compliance, Air Vista promised a thorough reform of its gate crew training. Yet the harm was too great for their words to hide, and the stock dropped 14%. 3 senior executives were put on leave. Lawsuits started to arise. Internal whistleblowers came forward. Additionally, there was a subtle change in the tone of gate. Agents at airports around the nation. TSA officers paused before singling after supervisors examined override logs. Some went out because they were afraid the next badge might not be visible. Not because they were afraid of a badge. Ava quietly went back to work. There was no pomp or circumstance, just a fresh case number 180 Pacific area in the folder. A different airline, a different state, same playbook, same procedure. She put her old, damaged passport in evidence from the little case marked was kept. Not because she no longer needed it, but because the question, how do you break a system without breaking yourself, would eventually come up. And that cover was torn off. The answer would be in the center. 3 days later, Ava sat by herself in a peaceful at a smaller rural airport. The gate lounge is free of people, cameras, and mistrust, only the occasional boarding announcement and the soft hum of a vending machine over the intercom. She was holding a brand new, crisp, and flawlessly undamaged. The cover gleamed like armor amid the overhead lights. However, she left it resting in her lap, full of significance. Without opening it, a young black kid, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, sat next to her mother across from her, holding a purple rucksack and a dog-eared library book. After giving Ava a brief glance, the girl muttered to her mother. The woman gave Ava a courteous smile and nodded. "You work for a theater line?" Ava stopped to catch her breath before responding, "Not quite," to the girl's question. "I just make sure they follow the rules," she said with a slight smile. "Cool." Ava suddenly had a tiny relief from the pain behind her ribs, because for each instance of quiet humiliation she had recorded, each room she had gone into just to be questioned, each tin the balance she had to strike was between diplomacy and dignity, moments of truth. No cheers, only healing. Her phone rang, and she sent a message. "In my class, we read about you, Mom. The teacher mentioned that you made a difference." Ava replied back, "No, I just brought to their attention that things needed to change, and perhaps that was sufficient." She had discovered long ago that justice doesn't always roar. It walks and waits at different times, but the individuals who carry it become the driving force behind the policy in a quiet, steady manner. The system doesn't rectify itself. It must be contested using the record, not anger. By yelling, but by demonstrating. The public would recall the widely shared video, the mute dignity, the torn passport, yet they would never witness the decades oft early career rejection letters that didn't say, "Because you're black," but rather meant it in any case. The conference rooms or the airport lounges where she was requested to present her boarding pass 3 times, where she had spent a lifetime learning how to sit still, and her ideas were only recognized once someone else repeated them while being assessed. At last, she had transformed that silence into surveillance, that look into proof, that quiet into transformation. Justice doesn't always arrive in the form of blazing lights or hammering fists. Sometimes it just shows up quietly, leaving behind a system that will never be the same. He calmly holds a shredded passport. And if you've ever been ignored, disregarded, or questioned, let this tale serve as a reminder that your dignity is independent of their perception of you. Rooted in your self-perception. Ava's actions weren't spectacular, violent. It was planned, systematic, and devastatingly accurate. In the real world, change occurs by documenting the fire they said didn't exist, not by destroying things. Exist. I've witnessed far too many individuals put up with abuse because they don't believe they have the strength to resist. But without resisting, Ava clutched the mirror, which was sufficient to shatter all they had attempted to shield. If you've ever thought your voice wouldn't matter, keep in mind that being the loudest person in the room doesn't always translate into power. The room, often as a result of taking notes and then converting them into repercussions,